Come, join, arise and shine.
Wish you all the best.
Welcome everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all. Thank you for joining us today's international webinar Microsoft Azure Essentials. My name is Raj. I am the Associate Dean of Academics at FX Polytechnic College. FX Polytechnic College is one of the leading provider of social service and educational service. This college was established in 2006. Next, I would like to introduce our resource person, Mr. S.Vetrivelu, product consultant in technical team from Cognizant Technology Solutions in Toronto at Canada. He had completed BE degree in College of Engineering, Kindi, Chennai Anna University. He has also 13 years experience in this IT field and also presented the 50 webinars in Canada. Today's keynote, he is going to share about the Microsoft Azure. What is Microsoft Azure? Why do you learn Microsoft Azure? Why do you get the Microsoft Azure certification? If you want to become a Microsoft professional, what we can do? So these are the things to be covered in this today's webinar. Before get this started this webinar, a small request to all the participants. If you have any questions, please type them in question box or chat box in your control panel. I will bring them the questions during the presentation, and also we'll have the time for the question session at the end of the session. Without further more time, I will hand over the session to Mr. S.Vetrivelu. Welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning, anyone who is attending from different time zones. So we are going to look on Microsoft Azure Essentials today. I am S.Vetrivelu Sangamale, working as a product consultant in Cognizant. I have around 13 years of experience in IT industry. So we will quickly go through some of these cloud concepts and the digital technology that we are looking at. And this is all about Microsoft and Microsoft's product and the cloud technology called Azure. So we will quickly look into this agenda, that what will be the topic that we will be going through today. So we will be looking into this introduction to cloud, because some of you might be new or hearing it, for the first time, and some of you might be familiar with cloud. So you can just go through it and refresh it yourself, and you can look on some of the introduction as well in this topic. And we will go through overview of Azure. So we will give you a brief overview on what is Azure and who's using that and what are the different cloud computing services provided by Azure. Then we will dive into deep into this Azure core services. We will look into Azure total cost of ownership, small office, home office deployment. So that will give you some idea on how you can deploy some of this Azure platform, and comparison with some of the cloud providers. As you know that cloud is not just restricted to Microsoft. The cloud is an open technology where every organization in IT industry has stepped into the cloud. So we can compare with some of the other providers, for some better understanding. And we will talk about something on the Azure certifications path. So this will give you some information on what you have to achieve, or what is the track path that you have to take up some of the certifications in the Azure technology. So when we go into the cloud, right, so I just want to put it in the lighter note on how Microsoft is explaining to have a better understanding, like how we have some of these, the introduction to cloud is, pretty much simple, like how we are using an electricity. In our home, we would be just interested to have our light on by, flipping a switch on or off. so your light will be glowing and you will be enjoying the electricity. So in order to have a cloud in your home, you can log into your computer. So you just need to know like how you need electricity for that to happen. In that moment, the details of how electricity gets into the light bulb and are not important. So similarly for cloud, you don't worry about how the cloud uh, infrastructure is maintained. The infrastructure will be taken care by Microsoft, and you just have to turn on your computer like how you are switching on your light, and you can enter into this traveling through the large network of high voltage transmission lines, how the electricity is coming through. Similarly, undersea cables will be transferring the data, and you will be getting through the cloud information to your system. As a technology professional, it would be nice to have these same benefits when developing and deploying applications, storing data, streaming video, or even hosting a website, all require managing hardware and software. This management is necessary, you know, or you can say that, managing that particular thing will be an unnecessary thing. So as we saw that, why Azure is required with using with the multiple technologies, we want to look on how the Azure is spread across the globe. Azure is, expanded to 58 regions worldwide, and it is expanded to 140 countries and 100K plus miles of fiber and subsea cable. As you know, the world is connected through subsea cables. So the US is connected from different available regions and availability zones into the globe. So if you see here the available region, which is highlighted in the blue dot, West Central US, South Central US, Canada Central, North Central, Canada East, Norway East. So some of these dark spots that we have, all of them are the locations that are available region. If you look at in India specific, you have West India, Central India, South India, and you have the Southeast Asia as the availability zone. So we will look further into what is availability zone in upcoming slides. When you look at some of these dotted spots with blue color, those are the announced region. So it means Microsoft is expecting to establish a data center and available region or availability zone in the future. You will be having the Spain Central, Poland Central, Israel Central, Qatar Central, etc. And also you can see this New Zealand North. So this is how the Azure is today expanded and spanned across the globe with available regions and the availability zones. So based on this strong connectivity, Microsoft provides an extraordinary services through Azure Cloud. So we will go further into this availability zones. So this feature helps provides better availability for your application by protecting them from data center failures. Each availability zone is a unique physical location in Azure region. Each zone comprises of one or more data centers that has independent power, cooling, and networking. Hence, the physical separation of availability zones helps protect applications against data center failures. Using availability zones, you can be guaranteed an availability of 99.99% of your virtual machines. You need to ensure that you have two or more virtual machines running across multiple availability zones. So even if one data center or any of the failures in the rack that happens into that particular availability zone, your application will be always available to you through another availability zone. That is an extraordinary feature, and that is a great design that they have in place for Microsoft Azure. We will look into this Azure cloud computing services. So some of the cloud models, right? So you might be wondering what is cloud and what kind of model they are performing, and they are having this in this current state. So there are four ways that you can look at on the different cloud models that we have. One is that on premises. So that one is something that you have to manage everything by yourself, right from application, data, then you have runtime, middleware, operating system, virtualization, servers, storage, networking, etc. So you have to manage each and everything that has been highlighted here in blue color. And it is going to give you a lot of expenses, maintenance, and you need to maintain it for a long time. But there are three unique models that has been provided by cloud providers. It is not just applicable for Azure. It might be applicable for any of the cloud providers that we have with respect to Amazon Web Services. I mean, Amazon Web Services and Oracle Cloud, or you can still go with the Google Cloud, anybody, right? So they provide all these features. The first one that we would be seeing today is infrastructure as a service. When you look at the highlights here, if you look at the blue color, you have application, data, runtime, middleware OS, and operating system. Only these five segments, right? So you can say these are the five areas that you need to manage. And some of this virtualization, which is like virtualization machines, virtual VM, and servers, storage, networking, all of them will be managed by Microsoft. So this is coming under the infrastructure as a service. When you go for a platform as a service, you just need to manage two of them, which is application and data. Rest of the things like runtime, middleware, operating system, virtualization, servers, storage, networking can be managed by Microsoft. Similarly, when you go for software as a service, you don't need to manage anything. You just have to start using the application. So that will be like application, data, runtime, middleware, operating system, virtualization, servers, storage, networking. Everything will be managed by the Microsoft. When I say here in the Microsoft, it will be all managed by the cloud provider. So this is, one of the cloud models, and this is one of the thing that we have to primarily understand about cloud computing. We will look into this infrastructure as a service, right? When you go for Azure Key Infrastructure as a Service, you have different segments that we saw here. If you see on the infrastructure as a service, that what are all the things that are managed by the Microsoft, you had virtualization, servers, storage, and networking. So you can see on this virtualization where you have the computing process. This computing can have a single virtual machine, or it is based on the availability set. So that is, the computing is one of the key infrastructure process. And you have a storage where you have to store, like how you are buying a hard disk for storing the information that you have. You need to store all the information in cloud into this Azure storage, disk storage, or table storage, or blob storage, or file storage. We will be looking into some of these storage concepts, in upcoming slides, and we'll get a better understanding. Like, you have to store some image, or you want to store some file, you want to image some data. All these things can be achieved through this storage mechanism. So the next story is all about networking. It's not that just about networking is all about connecting a physical cables in your home by computing to one to another machine, and you have established a networking. In Azure as well, in cloud, you have a networking concept where you have virtual net, VNet concepts, and then you have NSG. NSG is a network security group. You have a gateway, you have express route, you have traffic manager. So all these things are essential in order to establish that your infrastructure as a service in the cloud. So we'll be looking into some of these Azure virtual machine versus containers versus serverless. Why I want to bring this concept is because you want to understand how this virtual machine and some of the advanced features are working in this cloud computing. When you look at the first concept as a virtual machine, you have the physical hardware, and you have the host operating system, and you have hypervisor controller. And on top of it, each virtual machine will be segmented into different pieces. You will be seeing that virtual machine 1, you will be seeing the virtual machine 2, and you will be seeing the front-end applications that you are trying to build or install into these virtual machines. When you go for a virtual machine, you have options to install your guest operating system with a different Linux platform, and you can go for another platform with Windows. Similarly, you will be having this virtual hardware, and you will be identifying those virtual machine as virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2. When we go for an advanced concepts in virtual machine, you don't need the virtual hardware. That is where you go into a container engine. So this container engine is nothing but you pack your applications into a container and you just deploy it into this machine where these containers can be executed with available hardware at the time, and you have an optimized performance, and you don't need to worry about taking care of several virtual hardwares by installing different operating systems there. And this is one of the key developing things. So the containers, when we talk about it, currently Docker is one of the key container provider, and container is used to manage the cloud computing and the virtual deployment into the system. And sometimes when you want to have a notification just after you purchase something by using your credit card, so you wanted to go to shop and buy something in a grocery, or you are going to buy something in a bigger purchase like for your personal home decor or whatever it is, you just swipe your credit card. Once you swipe your credit card, you just want a notification sent to your email ID. So that can be achieved just through this serverless concept. You don't need to maintain your servers. So what is the difference here is that even though you install your system into the virtual machine and you have a storage and everything, you need to pay to the cloud provider for each and every service that you are providing and availing for. So similarly, if you are just using the serverless runtime, and it is just not going to cost you much because you are not going to have a server. So this is one of a perfect comparison between the Azure virtual machines and containers and serverless concepts in cloud computing. So next thing is that, as we saw just before about infrastructure as a service, that is one of the key benefits of cloud computing. This is all about Azure's key platform as a service, right? So when you saw a slide as that what are the different platforms that we had, if you see here, right, so this is the platform as a service. So when you have to see what are the managed things by Microsoft, you had the runtime, middleware, operating systems, virtualization, servers, storage, networking. We saw in the infrastructure services as virtualization services and storage and how the networking is done. Similarly, for the platform as a service, you can see what are the different options provided by the Microsoft for computing, for web and mobile concepts, for developer services, for integration, for analytics and Internet of Things, for data, as well as the media and CDN. So, and one of the key factors that we have to consider about Azure is all about security and management. It is one of the extremely secured platform. So each of these categories that you see, that what are the things that are involved into this compute, where you have cloud services, service fabric, batch, remote app. So these are the extraordinary platform services that has been provided by Azure. I just want to highlight that the database area, because you might be familiar with SQL databases that you have been studying in your college. So this is also into Azure platform now. So you can access your SQL database, you can access your SQL data warehouse, you can access your any tables or data, anything into the Microsoft Azure. You can just connect to the system once you open your Azure account, and you can try to access and store your data and retrieve it from that perspective. So this is also an option that is available. When you go into this security management, you have the Azure portal, and there is something called Active Directory and multi-factor authentication. We will be seeing them in the upcoming slides in a little more detail about it. And you have hybrid operations, which are option for Azure AD Connect Health. So you will be able to see how this Azure system is performing, and you will be able to measure the Connect Health of this Azure system. So you can understand that how Azure platform is performing and how the health of the system is all through the softwares, and you can maintain and manage them. So the next thing that we have to see is all about Azure Key software services. An example is that Microsoft Office 365. I don't know how many of you have used, but the latest version that is there in that Microsoft Office has all the applications that are provided by Microsoft. For example, your Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Access, everything is being added into this Microsoft Office 365. And in addition to that, in corporate world, people will be using this Microsoft Outlook, where that will be used for checking out the emails and etc. All those features have been embedded into one application called Microsoft Office 365. And you don't need to manage the infrastructure or even the underlying operating system platform components or even the software. Everything will be maintained by Microsoft and in the Azure cloud. Here you just need to start directly using the software, and you can access your application data from anywhere in the world. You can access it through mobile, you can access it through the system or anywhere, and you don't have the difficulty of managing anything, and everything will be managed by Microsoft. So let's talk about something which is important on the Azure subscription type. So when we talk about the cloud, as we saw earlier, right? So it is just like you just subscribe to something and automatically you get all the benefits. The simple example that I would say is that how you are subscribing for your DTH provider, whether you are choosing your Airtel or you are choosing your Videocon or any of the providers who is providing you some of your channels like that. Azure is also a subscription mode where you can choose your options, whether you want to access to all the channels or you want to access to a sports channel or like that. There are different products and the availabilities have been provided by the Azure. And an important thing is all about in the subscription is all about everything will be costed, cost maintenance, and you have to pay for every subscription that you make, right? So when you go for an enterprise agreement, this is something that is for the larger organizations or an IT company where they make an enterprise agreement between Microsoft and their own company, and they make uh, consistent hardware supply as well as the application supply as well as everything that is needed for the project implementation purpose. So that will be in a very high level that you might not be using as a student. But when you go for pay as you go or for the Azure free trial, right? So we will talk more little about detail. And before that, I want to cover on the cloud solution provider. So the cloud solution provider is one of the options that has been provided by Azure. And if you want to just go for that particular subscription based on your necessary and based on your business need, you can go for that as well. So pay as you go. So what happens is that as much as you use, like how we are using the data in our mobile, like 1 GB or 2 GB or 3 GB, so however you want or how many calls you make. So based on that, you will be charged for your services provided in the similar way in Azure as well, that you can pay as you go. So whatever the option that you are using, whatever the different utilization into this Azure cloud, based on that you have to pay from your packet. And next one is all about Azure free trial. Azure free trial is something that they give you your $200 credit. So based on the $200 credit, you can use this Azure online services, which is for free, and it is for trial and it's for students. I will provide the link, in the upcoming slide where how you can access this Azure free trial, and we can go through that as well. So these are the different Azure subscription types that we have in the current scenario. So as we saw, the next is all about, we are going to deep dive on Azure core services. So there are different core services that are available in Azure. And the first one that we are going to see is all about Azure virtual machines. So when we talk about Azure virtual machines, it's nothing about, you have to connect to a different computer which is residing in the remote. I am sure most of you might have tried in the networking to connect a remote computer from your system. In Windows, if you go to the start menu and if you type a remote computer connection, you can connect to a remote desktop by entering an IP address. So for that, you need to enter your IP address. And similarly, when you create a virtual machine here in Microsoft Azure, you will be having a virtual machine, and that virtual machine will be set up with the respective IP address, and they will be able to provide the IP address for you to connect from the public domain, and you can connect through that, through that remote computer. So, what is this key thing that we're talking about? This free trial that we are having. So, this is the link that is, available online, and you can access for Azure Microsoft.com EN US free. You can go ahead and register yourself into this, and you have to be very cautious about it because this will be asking your credit card, and anything that you use, without awareness, then that will be charged for your credit card. So you have to be very cautious. But I would advise, for a learning purpose, it is one of the extraordinary feature provided by Microsoft for any student that would like to select and choose to learn about Azure. So the choosing the size for the virtual machine, here you get 750 hours of compute, only free per month, only for B1S virtual machine. So when you log into the virtual machine, or like, sorry, when you go into the Azure cloud through this free platform, you will be seeing all these options. So to select a virtual machine, you have to go and cautiously select which one is free. So the B1S virtual machine is the free. So you have to be very cautious because you will be having different virtual machine size here. So you will be seeing that B1LS, B1MS, B1S, B2MS. Among these, you have to select B1S because that is the only thing that is available as a free for the users. So if you see, right, like how you are buying a hardware from a computer shop in your town, you will be looking for different concepts, right? Like what are the hardware capabilities. When you look at the CPU, you will be choosing what is the RAM size, right? You want to choose how many GB you want. Similarly, you will be selecting what is the data disk and what will be the different options. So similarly, right, when you select here, you want to select for the size of the computer in the virtual machine, and you want to select for the family, or you want to select for the premium disk, or etc. You have to clearly choose which type of option that you are looking for, as well as which region that you are looking for the Azure provider and the data center. So you have to select which operating system you want. Like for example, you want to select Windows Server, or you want to select a Linux, etc., based on your need. And it is important, when you go for this free option, always look for B1S virtual machine, because that is the only thing that you have a free compute for 750 hours, per month. And it is going to be available for you only 1 month. When you want to use that option, you just decide that you are going to explore more on Azure virtual machine, and you are going to learn a lot about Azure technology, and then only you can subscribe and start using it. Because if you don't use in 30 days, it will get expire. So the next thing, right, is all about costing for virtual machine. So remember that costing for a virtual machine is depends on several factors, such as time as it runs for, and the region used for hosting the virtual machine, the underlying operating system. There are three things that we saw. For example, if you take the region, it might be in the United States, or it might be in the Europe, or it might be in India, or in the Australia or New Zealand. Whatever the region that you are picking, based on that, you will be getting the charged. You will be getting charged basically, and how long the virtual machine is going to run in that particular selected region, and how long you are going to use it. Based on that as well, you will be charged. And similarly, you will be charged based on the operating system, whether it is based on Windows operating system or Linux, or anything that you are choosing. Based on that, you will be charged. If you don't need the virtual machine running for a certain duration of the time, you can always go ahead and stop the virtual machine. And this will ensure that you don't get charged for the compute cost of the virtual machine. So this is one of the great feature that has been provided by Azure, that you can stop the virtual machine anytime that you want, but you have to remember that you will be always charged for the other aspects of the virtual machine, such as the disks that are attached to the virtual machine, even if the virtual machine is stopped, right? So you have to be always prepared to understand, the what are the concepts and what are the in-depth features that has been picked up, and what are the things that are available for us. Based on that, the costing for the virtual machine will be defined. So next thing that I wanted to talk about is when you have, when you had a look on the compute slide of infrastructure as a service, you would have seen that availability sets. So why the availability set is a very key thing is because if an unplanned event wherein the underlying infrastructure fails unexpectedly, the failures could be attributed to network failures, or it may be due to local disk failures, or even rack failures. During those events, you may not be having your virtual machine availability, and your application may go down. In order to avoid that, you need to choose and pick an availability sets. And sometimes there will be a planned maintenance event by Microsoft, wherein Microsoft needs to make planned updates to the underlying physical environment. In such cases, a reboot might be required on your virtual machine. So you can increase the availability of your application by making use of availability sets. Each virtual machine that is assigned to this availability set is assigned a separate fault and update domain. So in order to maintain your application consistently live, and your application is always available in the virtual machine, and you are able to access that available application anytime, you have to always choose an availability sets. And I am sure that you will be able to have an 100% coverage, or 99.99 SLA as mentioned by Microsoft. So that is the concept about the availability set. So we will be, diving into the next concept on Azure Core Services. This is all about Azure Virtual Network. As I gave a quick introduction about how this Azure networking has been set up, similar to a quick introduction that I gave on a hardware networking that we maintain, we will be having Azure Virtual Network as well. So in Azure platform, you will be setting up the network. So we will look into how Azure Virtual Network works. The Azure Virtual Network Services is used to define an isolated network in Azure. In Azure cloud itself, you will be having a virtual network. So the virtual network can then be used to host your resources such as Azure virtual machines. We will be seeing on some of these subnet mask and also this network security group in upcoming slides, and it will give you a better understanding on how this networking has been set up, and how the virtual machines as well as the database components are attached to that particular one. And we will be having the Azure virtual network that gets assigned an additional address space, which you specify when you create an Azure virtual network. So when you are creating an Azure virtual network itself, you have to tell that, which address space that you want to use that particular virtual network. You can then add subnets to your Azure virtual network, and this helps to divide your network into more logical segments. So what is the key thing about subnets, right? So it's all about subnets and network security group. You have a subnet A, right? You have a default space as 10.0.0.0, and right from 0 until 24 you have different addresses that you can select. So in this you can choose any of the address space that you want. If you look at the what is NSG, right? That is what we were talking about, the network security group. It is used to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. Let's say, for example, you are going to connect through the Azure network from a remote desktop connection from your Windows network, and you are connecting through an IP address that has been given. So when your IP address, when you are entering the IP address, you need to access the Azure system, Azure resource where the virtual machine is present, if you are setting up a filter to stop that particular IP address, the source IP address where you are connecting through this Azure network, then you can easily stop or eliminate some of the IP addresses that should not connect to this network security group. This can be achieved through this NSG. When you mention that who need to access the inbound traffic, who needs to access your Azure cloud, then you can define all of them into this network security group. When you see here is an example of how multiple subnets and how you can have one subnet named subnet A in the virtual network to host your web services and another subnet to host the database services. So you can see here very clearly that the virtual machines are defined for web servers as a separate one in subnet A, and in subnet B you can see that virtual machines defined with the database servers. It is always advisable to have a separate machine for web servers and a separate machine for database servers. Why? Because if somebody is trying to hack into your system, he should not be accessing into your data, because data is the key thing. So even if they are going to access your web services, when you have it as a separate subnet A, they may not have the access to the database servers in the another virtual machine. So by this way, you can handle a excellent way of protecting your system from the hackers. And when you look at the network security group, there are some of the rules that you can set up, like how a picture has been shown here with respect to how you can define the priority as well as the inbound as well as the outbound rules that are used to control the traffic, right? So when you look at the by default option, all traffic into a virtual machine is denied. You have to explicitly add rules to allow traffic into a virtual machine, and by default, all traffic outbound onto the internet is allowed. So all the inbound that you are receiving for the virtual machine need to be defined based on the traffic, and you have to select what are the rules and who can access your virtual network, as well as who can be allowed to access the system and who have to be restricted. So all this information have to be selected when you are setting up your virtual machine. So these are the key things. I just wanted to highlight about Azure Virtual Network, and I just want to give an introduction that how a virtual network will be set up into the Azure cloud, and what are the key things that we have to consider when you are setting up the Azure Virtual Network. So the next topic is one of the Azure core services. We will be looking into this Azure storage account. So the storage account, right? So when you talk about the storage account, it is nothing but what type of information that you want to store, whether you want to store a file or whether you want to store a data, or whether you want to access into the tables and put some information in the column on the row, whatever the data that you have, or you want to store some of these videos or the pictures that you have, because that will be requiring memory size, and also like it will be a more uh, high demand, especially when you look at current world where everyone is started using the mobile, and you want to take everything through an image or a video, right? So you want to store them into the database. So when you go for a bigger storage, like for example, if you take an YouTube or in Facebook, every application is all about graphic driven, and also you have all of them are with the image or videos. When you want to store such large applications, you might need large storage accounts. And similarly, it depends on what kind of application that you are developing, right? So when your application is all about some of the interesting facts with just a data, or it is just about having some of the images as well as the videos that you want to upload into your application, and based on the nature of the application and the business functionality, you have to define what kind of Azure storage account that you want to choose. So there are different types of Azure storage accounts, and I'm just going to highlight you very key thing that we are going to use. The one is general purpose V2 account. This is recommended for most scenarios. Why? Because this storage account type provides the blob file, queue, table services. We will look into these four different types, right? So when you say blob, what is that blob, right? This is specifically when you want to perform or do your premium performance for storage block or upon blobs. And file storage accounts, this is specifically needed when you want to premium performance for file only storage. And when you want to use some large images, videos, then I would recommend that you have to go for a blob storage accounts. And when you choose this general purpose V2 storage account, this will be utilized to store any type, as we mentioned. So you can go for a blob as well as the file storage, or as well as for the queues and table services. You can see the picture that how the blob containers is defined in Azure, as well as the file shares, the queues and tables. So this is one of the table where you have an entry with the partition key, with the row key and the timestamp when it was trying to access this data. Similarly, you will be having the images stored into this blob containers, and some of the files. Let's say you are having a HTML file, or you are having a text file, or you are having a CSV file, or you are having an Excel file, or whatever the file formats that you have. All of those files can be stored into these file shares. And queue, right? So basically what happens is the queue concept, the messaging queues. When you send a message, when you send a 10 messages at a time in a subsequent way, each message will be received in a queue, and first come first serve basis, it will be processed and it will be moved to the next services. So sometimes when you want to pass a message from source to destination, that just goes through this queue process. So this picture, right, where we have some more clear picture on how this Azure Queue storage is done, as well as the web application and how the blob images are done. So when we talk about the blob storage, this is the object storage for the cloud. Here you can store massive amounts of unstructured data on cloud. This is highly recommended when you want to store images, documents, video, and audio files. Within the blob service, you can create a container that is used to store the blob objects. There are three different types of blobs. One is block blobs, and other is append blobs, and the other is page blobs, right? So this is used for different purposes. For example, the block blobs, this is used for storing text and binary data. The append blobs, this is ideal for logging the data. And page blobs, this is used for storing virtual hard disk files for Azure virtual machines. If you look at the picture, right, so when a user is uploading a video via web application, it goes through a web app, right? And then the application in the web app sends a message to the queue in the location of the video, and another application reads the message from the queue. So the queue will be giving you the information based on the order or the way it processed. And similarly, you can go through some of this blob storage and through the container, how a video is getting stored into the blob storage, and some of these values will be stored as well as in the blob storage into the container. So these are some of the key aspects and different options that we have for storing a data into this Azure computing. So the third thing, right? So when we talk about tables, we always have our database. This is one of the favorite topic for most of us, because the database is something that used in day-to-day activity. And this Azure SQL database will be falling under the platform as a service from Microsoft. This is a service that allows you to create managed Microsoft SQL Server database on the cloud. The advantages of this using the services are that you don't have to manage the underlying infrastructure. This is managed by Azure. You have a variety of purchasing options. You have automated backups. This reduces the burden of managing backups. It gives you a service level agreement of 99.99%. If you need to have more control over the database engine, then consider installing the SQL Server engine on the Azure virtual machine. So these are some of the things that you can take up as an advantage in Azure, and you can install as you go. So when you purchase the database, different storages like we discussed on the blob storage, or you want to go for a general purpose V2, which covers the entire thing like file, queue, blob, and tables, where you store anything that you want, then you have to definitely pay for the services that you are opting for, because whatever you are choosing will be based on the subscription that you are taking and what kind of benefits you are availing from Azure. And based on the benefits that you are availing from Azure, you have to be ready to pay what is demanded there, and how the calculation is expected. So for example, if you want to assess what kind of information or what kind of options that you want to choose and what kind of subscription that you want to take up on the Azure, you can calculate them in online. I have a link where you can go and see what is the estimate that you will be getting for choosing the Azure options that you have in cloud. So this is one of the interesting fact where we talk about the data warehousing. So in the existing world, there was a enterprise data warehousing, and that has been now replaced with the Azure Synapse Analytics. So this service is used for enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. So big data is one of the latest word that you might be hearing into this digital. And when you want to perform an analysis on large data set, consider using this service. So when you want to go for a large data sets, as we mentioned in this diagram with respect to this model and service on the data warehouse, which we have highlighted, I would recommend you to go for Azure Synapse Analytics. So when you go for the cloud, right? So you have a different platform that has been identified as we have seen in the picture here with LOB, CRM. You have graphs, you have image, social, Internet of Things. All these things will be ingested into this data orchestration and monitoring. When the data orchestration and monitoring is performed, the next thing is all about that you have to store, you have to do a storage. So you need a big data store there. And you can have some of these latest technologies with respect to the Hadoop and Spark and machine learning, right? So there's some of these things that are going with preparation and training models. And you can go for choosing this data warehouse and choose this model service and this model and serve. So once you perform this data warehousing operation, you can take out the apps plus insight. So all this information have been provided into this Azure Synapse Analytics. Raj, I'm just taking a break, okay? I'm just drinking some water. So the next topic that we are going to see is all about Azure total cost of ownership. So what is this thing, right? Just a few minutes back, we discussed about that. What is the estimate that we will be getting for Azure services that we are looking for? In order to do this, to get an idea of possible total expenses for moving your resources to Azure, you can make use of Azure total cost of ownership calculator. So this is a calculator that will tell you an idea or an estimate of what you need to move your application and whatever that you have into Azure. So if you want to see what are the options that we have to define it based on the workload. So the define your workloads, right? So this will be asking you to enter the workload that you want to perform, to understand what are the servers that you are going to do. So the environment, which will be selecting with the physical servers, that what number of servers that you want. And workload is with respect to the operating system that you are choosing, whether you are choosing a Windows operating system or Linux based operating system. And you want to know how many servers that you want to choose. You can go up to 9999 servers. And in this option that we have just selected, okay, so I just want to have some two server, then you can enter as two. And also you have to select the proc per server. You can select 4 procs and core per procs. So based on this selection and how we want to select for each of these options that we are going with infrastructure as a service or platform as a service or software as a service. So based on the different workloads and different need of the user, you can choose which one you want to select. So the total cost of ownership will be calculated here and it will be displayed. So for your convenience, I just provided the link as well below. So you can select the link and you can choose which or what type of information that you are looking for. So this is a very helpful thing to estimate what kind of cost of ownership that you need to spend or expect for this Azure platform. So the next thing that I want to talk about is one of the key thing that we have to understand: the security, privacy, compliance, and trust. In today's world, we are going to have a huge risk when you maintain a high volume of data as well as some of the highly confidential information in online, because it is always important that you have to have a different layers of security and you have to maintain some of this information into this cloud with a safety manner. So in order to do that, we have privileges that will be provided through the Active Directories. For example, based on the system admin role, whether you are a moderator or you are just someone who needs to write some information, and you are just someone to write or read the information, based on that, Active Directory will be defined. So Azure Active Directory is your identity system in the Azure. Here you can define users and groups and provide them permissions to your resources. So based on what type of user that you are having, whether he wants to have read write permission or whether he wants to have only read only permission, based on all these options, this Active Directory permission will be defined. And based on the Active Directory's privilege, each user who's getting added to that Active Directory will be provided with that particular option. And other security related aspects with respect to the US and international standards as well as the European Union, we need to go for different options that are already provided by Microsoft. The first are the three key security related aspects are GDPR. One is the General Data Protection Regulation. So this is some of the regulation that needs to be followed, and it is already followed by Azure. And the next one is that ISO, International Organization for Standardization. So this is one of the international, non-profit organization that has been conducted, and we need to be following the standards that has been defined by them, and we need to use the Azure application. And the next one is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So this is one of the specific organization that controls the innovation related and putting measures in United States, where we have to follow the standard of them and we have to follow their recommendations. So when you go for an Active Directory, your screen will be appearing like this in Azure, and you can select your Active Directory based on the users that you are going to access the system, and you can provide them the privileges that they need. So in order to have some additional security, we saw one of them in the top slides where you have mentioned that there's security related section where multi-factor authentication, right? So you can also enable multi-factor authentication for users. Here users needs to use an additional mechanism in addition to username and password to log into Azure. You can also make use of conditional access policies to create conditions to allow or deny users to log into Azure. So when you say multi-factor authentication, it is nothing but you are just having an additional layer of security. For example, some instances, let's say in your banking system, you want to have, you want to perform an online transaction. When you are entering your ATM card number, in addition to the ATM card number, you have been asked to enter a one-time password. So that is for an additional security measure. if you want to have a one-time password sent to your mobile, and you can use this option for multi-factor authentication enabled services in the Microsoft Azure, and you can have multiple, safety secure permissions. So far we have seen some of the core concepts and the core things about Azure. So let us say that, as a aspirant, you are a student, or in future, if you want to start a company or you want to start a small company, how will you do a deployment into Azure platform? You want to establish a particular Azure cloud, and you want to establish an office for some startups, or you want to build some projects, or you want to have some training sessions, and you want to establish some Azure platform for your college or university or whatever it is. For small count, right? I'm just telling about 5 users. I'm just giving you a brief example about how a small office, home office can be set up and deployment done for Azure platform. Similarly, you will be looking for some of the medium and large scale enterprises, like some IT organizations, that will be in a huge way. That is in a different process, but I'm just going to cover quickly about small office, home office deployment. In this business case, companies starting online marketing or sharing information, small or medium office with 1 to 2 applications currently hosted on server, personal website for content sharing and blog writers, and for learning and testing. So these are the some of the examples. Very small audit firms, learning and training institutes, and research firms, they can use this small office, home office deployment model for achieving your application and performing your business needs through Azure platform. Connectivity to the Azure, right? So basically, you have to see how the connectivity to Azure happens. When you see this left-hand side, this is the cloud, right? And you have the customer, and you have the characteristics. You have an internet connectivity straight to straight from customer to cloud, internet facing with public IP address in Azure, which will be having DNS, load balancing, DDoS protection, and WAF. You can connect the internet connectivity through this way. And remote access point to site connectivity, you have access to remote access to the virtual network on premises and connect from anywhere. And you can have different systems like Mac or Linux or Windows. And you have to define the radius and Active Directory authentication. So based on that, you will be able to access the cloud. And the next option is that you have site to site VPN connectivity. You can connect with a high throughput, and you will be having extraordinary speed, and you have secure cross premises connectivity, and BGP active for high availability and transit routing. So with this option, you will be having a very secured and private VPN connectivity network site to site through Azure and your way. And the next option that you have is that express route private connectivity. So you will be having an express connectivity as a private connection through Microsoft. You have Office 365, Azure PaaS, platform as a services, and this is for a very mission critical workloads. When you have a huge workload, you have to consider of looking for this option. So small office deployments, right? How this Azure region native security connection happens. This users can be accessing through the cloud through DNS. As we saw that, what is the resource group and virtual network and subnet. You have Azure virtual machine, which this virtual machine has both web and DB, and you have subnet mask, and you have the network security group, and you have the virtual network established here. And inside this virtual network, as I said, you can have different subnets, and you can have a different Azure virtual machine, one for web services and another for database. Because if you have a separate web services and a separate database connections, you are assured for high security. And when some, as I said, right, there is a modified version that I am going to show you with respect to having a virtual machine separated with respect to web virtual machine and the database virtual machine. Even though you are in the same network, you will be having a separate subnet address. So based on that, even if hacker enter into a system, he cannot be able to enter into a database system. So this is the one of the preferred, or the advised way of setting up your virtual machines in Azure platform. You can have a separate virtual network, as well as in a separate database virtual machines. So, this is just giving an idea that, how you can establish and set up the system and how you can go into the virtual network. So the next thing that we want to see is that, a key competitor for Microsoft Azure is Amazon AWS. So Amazon AWS is one of the cloud provider. And, if you see some of these categories that we have looked upon, compute, networking, and storage, the services that are provided by these categories are virtual servers, availability, virtual networking, global traffic management, private connectivity, network gateway, networking, load balancers, object storage, virtual machine disk storage, hybrid storage, storage gateway. So as you see that, compute, networking, and storage, all three categories that we have seen, if you go into this Azure free link that we have provided, you can see all these providers are provided products will be available for you for picking. So when you take the compute in Azure world, they call it as Azure Virtual Machine, but in Amazon Web Services, they call it as AWS EC2 instance. For a compute availability, they call here as VM scale set, virtual machine scale sets. They call it as auto scaling. And for VNets, they call it as Azure VNet. And in Amazon, they call it as Amazon VPC. So this is just a quite product names and the differences between Azure and Amazon Web Services that are the options that we have in the cloud. And just to give an idea that what are the options that are available for compute, networking, and storage, just to give an idea of how these products are compared. So the next key thing that I wanted to highlight is that Azure certifications path. It is not that, just you attend this session today and get some introduction about some of these concepts and, get some idea about what are the words and the keywords that we have in Azure cloud computing. I don't want to stop you there. I want you to keep explore what is there in Azure and how you can secure a job through this, through learning through this Azure certifications. And if you are a certified professional, you can demand for your, pay, and you can get placed into a well or established organization in an easy way, whether you might be doing a diploma or you might be doing an engineering or you might be doing an art and science track with computer related. You always need to have some certifications in order to prove yourself that you are knowledgeable in particular area. So in order to certify yourself, you have Azure apps and infrastructure certification. So to start with, right, so you have to always start with the fundamentals, because whatever the topics that we have covered here are covering with respect to the Microsoft Azure essentials, and gives you some of the fundamentals as well. So for Azure, you have AZ 900, and I have mentioned the link for certifications that you can go and browse through online, and you can view what are the certification options that are available for Azure. So you can start with AZ 900 if you are a developer, and if you want to perform different type of roles with respect to Azure administrator, or you want to perform an Azure security engineer, or you want to perform Azure architect or Azure engineering expert, you have different options. But it always recommended to start with Microsoft Azure fundamentals with the AZ 900, and you can proceed with different type of associate level and expert level certifications. You can always explore what are the different certifications available through this option and through this link. So you have to probably pay around $100 or something to pay or get one of the certifications, and you can probably say that you are Microsoft Azure certified professional. In order to have practical knowledge, I always recommend to go through that free link provided by Microsoft and use the $200 provided as a free credit for exploring into this Azure network, so that you will be having the practical experience through online by utilizing the $200 student credit that has been given by exploring into the application, as well as you can learn what are the different concepts into this Azure, and you can explore through the certification documents as well. And you have several documents and several online resources, and Microsoft website have a lot of documentations as well to prepare yourself for these examinations. So that's all, guys, we have today for Azure cloud computing, and these are some of the business essentials. Let me know if you have any questions. I am happy to answer you, and thanks for your time.
Behalf of Department of Computer Engineering, FX Polytechnic College, I would like to propose a hearty vote of thanks to our resource person, Mr. S.Vetrivelu, for really enlightened with knowledge and presence. Thank you for your very interesting, thought-provoking address. I am sure that all the participants have taken note of your all the suggestions and will be discussing with their organization the action to be initiated at their level. We are thankful to our Honorable Chairman and Founder Dr. S. Babu for their motivation and their providing this opportunity. I would like to thank our principal, Mr. Rufus, for his excited support. A special thanks to our HODs and faculties for their coordination and support. Our heartfelt thanks to participants for their active participation. With warm these words and kind message we move to the end of this session. Thank you, one and all.